Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My wife and I were renting this nice house with a decent backyard, perfect for our two dogs. We weren't exactly rolling in money, but we made it work. The house needed some repairs here and there, but our landlord was usually pretty good about fixing things. Then came the windstorm. It was one of those nights where you could hear the wind howling through every crack in the house. When morning came, we discovered our wooden fence had been completely blown down. No big deal, I thought. That's what landlords are for, right? We called her immediately, and she assured us she'd get contractors out to fix it. A week and a half went by and still no fence. This meant we had to personally supervise our dogs every time they needed to go outside, which was getting really old, really fast. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was sleeping peacefully when someone started knocking on my bedroom's sliding glass door. At first I chuckled, thinking my wife had locked herself out again. I walked to the door barely awake and definitely not dressed for company, but it wasn't my wife. It was my neighbor. Let's just call him Ken. Standing there on my back patio. This guy had actually walked through my backyard, crossed over the fallen fence, and came right up to my bedroom door. Ken started yelling about how the fence had been down for almost 2 weeks and how unacceptable it was. I told him I understood and was upset about it too, still trying to process why this man was at my bedroom door. When he demanded to know what I was going to do about it, I explained that I was just a tenant and gave him my landlord's number, suggesting he call her with his complaints. The moment I mentioned the landlord, his whole demeanor changed. It was like watching a balloon deflate. I used this moment of calm to excuse myself and put on some underwear because having this conversation half-naked wasn't ideal. The story doesn't end there though. The contractors finally showed up after I called my landlord about Ken's unexpected visit. But Ken wasn't done making everyone's life difficult. The workers needed to access both sides of the fence to fix it properly. Pretty logical, right? Not to Ken. He actually called the police, claiming the contractors were trespassing on his property. The police showed up looking as confused as you'd expect. One of the officers asked Ken how exactly he expected them to fix the fence without accessing both sides. Ken had no answer for that one, but he wasn't done yet. The contractors had parked their vehicles in front of my house while working on the fence. Perfectly legal. Plenty of space on the street. Ken decided this was his next target. He called the police again, claiming there was an abandoned vehicle that needed towing. The contractors just moved their vehicles at the end of each day, so that plan failed. Then Ken got creative. My wife and I went to use her truck one morning and found a parking ticket on it. Turns out Ken had called the police again, claiming our truck was illegally parked in front of our own house. We had to go down to the station to explain the situation. The officers actually rolled their eyes when we mentioned our address. One of them immediately recognized us as a house with a fence issue. They voided the ticket immediately. Apparently, they'd gotten quite familiar with Ken's complaints over those few days. The fence eventually got fixed, and things quieted down. Ken seemed to have run out of ways to complain about it. A few years later, we heard he'd passed away. I can't say anyone in the neighborhood missed his particular brand of entertainment. Let me tell you about something wild that happened about 5.5 months ago. I'm a college student, and I was staying at my parents' house during summer break. They're both cardiologists who work crazy hours. We're talking 10 to 15 hours a day. The pay is great, and they absolutely love what they do. Their house is pretty close to New York, and since they're rarely home, they installed security cameras everywhere. Good thing they did, because what happened next was absolutely insane. I've been having a pretty chill morning, just catching up on some reading and enjoying the quiet when the doorbell rang. Standing there was this middle-aged woman I'd never seen before, wearing what looked like expensive workout clothes and sporting that classic "I want to speak to your manager" haircut. I politely asked if I could help her. She immediately asked if our shower was working. Confused, I asked her to repeat herself. She explained that her shower was broken and she needed to get ready for an important meeting. I apologized and told her I couldn't help with that. She got upset and demanded to know why I couldn't help, insisting she would only need 15 minutes to shower. I explained that I couldn't let a complete stranger into my parents' house. That's when things went from weird to crazy. Her face turned red, and she started screaming at me. She demanded to know if I knew who she was, claiming she lived in the neighborhood and asking how I dared to treat her this way. I apologized again but stood firm that the answer was still no. She threatened to call the police, saying her husband had connections and would make my life miserable, while yelling about how I couldn't deny her access to basic facilities. She actually pulled out her phone and started dialing. I couldn't believe this was happening, so I quickly called my mom. I barely had time to explain that there was a crazy woman at the door demanding to use our shower and threatening to call the police before the woman lunged forward and grabbed my phone. In one swift motion, she threw it on the ground and started stomping on it until it was in pieces. I quickly backed away and locked the door while she stood outside screaming threats and obscenities. About 10 minutes later, I saw my mom's car pulling into the driveway. She must have realized something was wrong when my call got cut off. My mom may be small, but when she's angry, she's terrifying. She walked right up to the woman. Mom demanded to know what the woman was doing at our house. The woman screamed back that this was her neighborhood and that I had been extremely rude when she simply asked to use the facilities. Mom pointed out that this was private property and that the woman had destroyed my phone. The woman claimed I had threatened her and she had to defend herself. Their argument was interrupted by the arrival of 2 police cars. The woman immediately switched to victim mode and started crying. She thanked the officers for arriving, claiming that I had tried to assault her when she was checking on her house and that we were trying to break in. Mom said this was our house and that she had proof of residence. The woman accused us of forging the documents and demanded our immediate arrest. My mom, being the brilliant woman she is, simply smiled and asked the officers if they would like to see our security footage. The woman's face went pale. My mom pulled up the footage on her phone and there it was. Crystal clear video and audio of the entire incident from the woman's arrival to her destroying my phone. The officers watched the whole thing and their expressions went from confused to stern. Turns out this wasn't Karen's first rodeo. The police recognized her from several other reports of attempted theft and harassment in the area. She had a whole routine of trying to get into people's houses using various excuses, then stealing whatever she could get her hands on. They arrested her on the spot, charging her with assault, destruction of property, and attempted breaking and entering. She was screaming the whole time about how we'd regret this and how her husband would sue us all. When my dad finally got home from performing a heart procedure and heard the story, he laughed so hard he nearly got sick. He immediately ordered an even better security system with more cameras. We later found out she got sentenced to jail time, had to pay a hefty fine, and was ordered to stay away from our neighborhood. Haven't seen her since, but my broken phone got replaced with a better model. So I guess there was a silver lining after all. A little background about me. I work at a large used car dealership that also has service stations at some locations. I mainly work weekend and night shifts in the business office handling paperwork for sales while attending college. Our service department operates from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekdays, which I know isn't the most convenient schedule for most people working regular hours. To accommodate customers who can't make it during service hours, our service manager brings over a bin every Friday with all the weekend pickups. This allows customers to collect their vehicles from the main office outside regular service hours. This incident happened around 6 p.m. on a Saturday. My new co-worker and I were working the evening shift when this woman, let's call her Karen, stormed in. She was already fuming because she had to get her recently purchased car serviced. We have this policy where we fix any issues for free within the first 30 days and provide a complimentary rental car, so she wasn't paying anything. Still, I understand it's annoying to deal with car troubles right after buying one. I started getting her keys and the sign-out form, but she refused to sign anything without test driving the car first. That evening, we were short-staffed with only 3 people in the office. Our manager was away talking to the sales manager, and since I had almost 2 years of experience, I told my new co-worker I could handle the office alone while she took Karen to check her car. I instructed my co-worker to just have Karen start up the car, telling her that if there were any issues, we could give her back the rental and have our technicians look at it on Monday. My co-worker nodded and led Karen to the service lot. 45 minutes passed and we started getting busy. I was the only one who could help customers and sales associates with paperwork, so I told my manager I'd check on them to speed things up. When I got to the service lot, they were nowhere to be seen. Neither was Karen's car. I started panicking because my co-worker had left her phone in her cabinet, company policy since we handle sensitive information. After another 10 minutes, my co-worker came running back into the office, sweating and shaking. What happened next was unbelievable. The car's check engine light was off and it wasn't making any noise while idling. But Karen wasn't satisfied. She adamantly refused to sign anything until she could test drive the car herself. My co-worker tried explaining that our technicians had already test driven it as part of our standard procedure, but Karen wouldn't hear it. She insisted she needed to drive it herself. My co-worker attempted to explain that Karen couldn't drive the car without signing it out first, since it would make us liable if anything happened. But Karen wouldn't listen. She kept pushing, saying she just wanted to drive it around the lot and that my co-worker could come along to hear the noise she was concerned about. Being new and intimidated by Karen's aggressive behavior, my co-worker handed over the keys and got in the passenger seat. That's when things went south. Instead of staying in the lot, Karen drove off the property, took back roads, and got onto the interstate for a 35-minute joyride. My co-worker repeatedly pleaded with Karen to turn around and go back to the dealership, but Karen kept brushing her off, saying they just needed to wait for the noise to happen. When my co-worker insisted more firmly that they needed to return, Karen just snapped at her to wait. When they finally returned, my co-worker ran straight to the office in tears. Our manager immediately confronted Karen, telling her that her actions were completely unacceptable and that she had essentially kidnapped an employee. He demanded she leave immediately or he would call the police. Karen tried to defend herself, claiming she was just trying to show the problem with her car, but our manager cut her off and told her she was banned from the dealership. The police were called anyway, and Karen was charged with unlawful restraint. She tried arguing that my co-worker agreed to go with her, but the security cameras showed her aggressive behavior and how she ignored my co-worker's requests to return. I got reprimanded for letting a new employee handle such a situation, but Karen ended up with a criminal record and lost her new car since violating dealership policies voided her purchase contract. Back in high school, this girl, who used to be my sister's best friend, spread some nasty rumors that completely devastated my sister's reputation. The rumors were so bad that my sister had to transfer schools for her senior year. I've never forgiven her for that, and I probably never will. Life has a weird way of working out though, because now this same person lives in my neighborhood near the local park. Her family is from India. Her parents moved to the United States in the 1970s, and she was born here in 1981. Despite our history, we've come to an understanding of sorts. We're civil with each other, mainly because we have to be. She works as a dispatcher at our local police station now, and I often see her at the park with her kids, a 13-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. Usually when I see her running with her kids, we exchange quick waves and maybe have a brief chat. She's always careful to keep conversations short, which I appreciate given our history. But today, something happened that made me put aside our past differences. I was at the park taking pictures of some flowers when I overheard one of my neighbors, this entitled jerk, harassing her. This guy has been causing problems for months now, convinced that she's somehow in the country illegally, despite being born here. I looked up from my camera as I heard him approaching her. He started insulting her with racist comments, saying she smelled like a tandoori oven, and demanding to know when she would go back to where she came from. I couldn't just sit there anymore, so I stood up and walked over, making it obvious that I was pointing my phone camera at him. The entitled guy was shocked to see me defending her. He tried to appeal to me based on our shared race, suggesting that as a white person, I should be taking his side. I shut that down quickly by threatening to call the police, reminding him about his previous complaints. I even turned to my sister's former friend and asked her about police response times in our area, since she worked as a dispatcher. She caught on to what I was doing right away and played along, telling us that police usually arrive within 5 to 7 minutes, sometimes even faster. The entitled guy still wouldn't back down, continuing to insist that she was in the country illegally. I sarcastically responded that if she was illegal, then I was Q from Star Trek. I told him he'd better go home before I actually called the police and made things worse for him. My sister's former friend gave me a grateful look and mentioned something about making it up to me, but I just walked away. I didn't want her thanks. The truth is, I still can't stand her for what she did to my sister. That pain runs deep, and it probably always will. But watching this entitled neighbor harass her just because of her Indian heritage made my blood boil. You see, this isn't about liking or forgiving her. It's about basic human decency. This guy had been making these racist comments for weeks, and I'd had enough. Her kids don't deserve to hear that garbage, and neither does she. The fact that this entitled jerk thinks he can determine who is and isn't American enough is laughable. The incident didn't end there, though. The entitled neighbor started showing up at the park more frequently, trying to intimidate her and her kids. But now every time he appears, I make sure to have my phone out and ready to record. It's amazing how quickly racists back down when they realize they're being documented. Last week, he finally crossed the line by trying to block her path while she was running with her kids. I didn't just threaten to call the police this time, I actually did it. The responding officers took one look at my video footage and issued him a warning for harassment. They also helped my sister's former friend file for a restraining order. Now he can't come within 100 feet of her or her kids, and he's banned from the park during certain hours. I still see him glaring from his porch sometimes, but he doesn't dare say a word anymore. A few weeks after the restraining order was put in place, I learned through neighborhood gossip that the entitled guy had been trying to rally other neighbors against my sister's former friend. He'd been going door to door, spreading lies about her being part of some imaginary criminal organization. His plan backfired spectacularly, though. Several neighbors reported his behavior to the police, adding to his growing list of harassment complaints. Then something unexpected happened. During one of her morning runs, my sister's former friend stopped to help an elderly woman who had fallen on the sidewalk. It turned out this woman was the entitled guy's mother, who was visiting him. I watched from my porch as she called an ambulance and stayed with the older woman until help arrived, even though she knew exactly whose mother she was helping. The entitled guy came rushing out when he heard the ambulance, and his face turned red when he realized who had helped his mother. The following week, I noticed a formal letter being delivered to my sister's former friend's house. I learned it was a written apology from him, probably forced by his mother, who had apparently given him an earful about his behavior. While the apology didn't magically make him a better person overnight, his harassment completely stopped. These days, when he sees her at the park, he quickly turns and walks the other way. His mother, on the other hand, has become a regular sight in the neighborhood, often stopping to chat with my sister's former friend during her morning runs. I still keep my distance, maintaining our unspoken agreement of civil but minimal interaction. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.